Okay, Chairman, we're now live. Please.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Adults and Communities Scrutiny Committee. Nice to see everybody looking bright and breezy under these strange times. I'd like to start by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live streaming of this meeting through the Council YouTube page. Due to government guidance on social distance, this meeting is taking place remotely in accordance with current regulations, which make provision for remote attendance and remote access to council meetings. The meeting is also following Peterborough City Council's virtual meeting protocol. In order for this meeting to run smoothly, I ask several things of members and participants. First, that you keep your video and camera switched on with your microphone muted, except when you are invited to speak. If you wish to speak, then please raise the virtual hand, which is blue. I think on some devices it's different, but obviously just raise your hand. If you wish to speak, then please, in which case the raised hand function has moved. Oh, sorry, David, I'm not reading the point. Whichever version you are using, please ensure you use your hand if you wish to speak. Democratic Service team will keep an eye on participants list to see who wishes to speak. Please be patient if you are not invited to speak as soon as you have raised your hand, as there may be other people waiting to speak before you. Democratic Services team will be monitoring the list to see if anybody drops out. If anybody drops out, they'll be contacting to obviously rejoin the meeting as soon as they can. As with all new systems, we may run into technical problems and ask for your patience. Should this occur, an adjournment of the meeting will be declared while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible, the meeting will be adjourned until such time as it can be reconvened. Finally, I would like to remind members that all virtual meetings are recorded. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, I'll begin to take a roll call of all scrutiny committee members to establish your presence. When your name is called, please unmute yourself and confirm your attendance. Thank you. Councillor Aitken.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bisbee.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Present, thanks.
Councillor John Fox.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Howard.
Good evening, present.
Councillor Howe.
Present.
Councillor Iqbal.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Sandra Bond.
Present.
Councillor Yazin.
Present, thank you, Chair.
Parish Councillor Neil Boyce.
Present, Chair.
Parish Councillor James Hayes.
Present, Chair.
Has Adrian joined us, David, do you know?
Yes.
Good
sorry,
evening, Chair.
sorry.
Apologies for my very last minute arrival. The A47 at Thorney is closed, which meant I've had quite a detour, so apologies. I'm here now.
No, we believe you, Adrian. Also in attendance is Adrian Chapman, Service Director, Communities and Partnerships, who will support the committee as lead officer. David Burkamp as supporting Democratic Services officer, and other members of Democratic Services team will be supporting the meeting in the background in case of any technical difficulties. Thank you. We'll now move to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies, David.
No apologies this evening, Chair.
Declarations of interest and whipping declarations. Any of those, please? Please raise your hand. Okay, no hands raised. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 3. Agree of the minutes held on 17th November 2020. Anybody got any objections? Please, can you raise your hand now, please? Okay, they're approved. That's good. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4. Call in of any cabinet or cabinet member or key officer decisions. David.
No requests for call in, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to agenda 5. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Safeguard and Adult Board Report 2019-2020, pages 11 to 34 on the agenda. I'd like to welcome the following officers who will present this report. Charlotte Black, Chair of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Safeguard and Adult Board, and Joe Proctor, Head of Services, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Safeguarding Board. Okay, would you like to do an overview?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm actually going to ask Joe Proctor, who's with us on the call, just to take us through the key points in her paper.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for inviting me this evening. It's the first time I've done one of these virtually, so bear with me. Thank you for inviting us. As you know, every year we bring our annual report to you for information purposes, and this is another one of those annual occurrences where we come to speak to you. From the outset, what I would just like to point out is that the annual report that's within your papers covers the period the 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020. So any of the information that's contained within it is very, very retrospective. And I think that's probably just worth laying that out before we just pull out the main highlights. So what I was going to propose to do is just do a very quick overview of what's in the annual report, but then give you a very quick update on how we've been dealing with COVID as well, because I thought that might be quite useful to you as a committee in terms of just kind of how we've been approaching the COVID situation and the safeguarding boards. So in terms of the report itself, the statute lays out for us what we have to contain within the report. It's very clear what detail we have to contain and present, and it's also been looked at by
Is it just me, David, or the sound gone?
I was just going to wait for someone else to comment to check it wasn't me. Joe, sorry, and we can't hear you. I can see you're not on mute, but your audio has suddenly cut out. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. Is that better?
That's much better, thank you. You're back on now. If you rewind by about 20 seconds or so, we should be fine.
Yeah, sorry. So the report has gone for our independent scrutiny, and they have confirmed that it has been signed off and it is compliant with statutory regulations. The other thing is, last year we produced this much more concise report. Both members at both at Peterborough and Cambridgeshire end said that there was an area that they quite liked that format, so we have kept that for this year. So again, we've gone for a much more quite concise report. So in terms of the highlights, the three areas that the Partnership Board has been focusing on, and this is not at the exclusion of all other safeguarding, but it's at things that we thought we needed to really focus on as a partnership, was making safeguarding personal, which is obviously the golden thread that runs through all safeguarding work. The pathways for those who are vulnerable. So these are people who don't meet the statutory criteria for statutory intervention, but are still vulnerable in terms of kind of their lifestyle or things that they're exposed to, and also are learning from our safeguarding adult reviews, our case reviews. So those are the three areas that we're focused on, and those are actually priorities that run from 2019 to 2021. So we've actually carried on working on those post the end of March when this report finishes. We've done quite a lot of work on all of those areas. A particular focus under the Making Safeguarding Personal is work that we've undertaken around the lived experience of the adult, and that importance in ensuring that the adult's voice is captured in terms of any recording across any of the partnership agencies that we work with. And we've done quite a lot of work around that in terms of guidance, resource packs, tools, training, and we've tried to do a quite holistic approach to that, and that's gone down really, really well. And more recent quality assurance activity has shown that we have seen a definite increase in the lived experience of the adult being reflected in partnership working. We've also ensured that Making Safeguarding Personal is within all single agency training. So we deliver the multi-agency training programme, but obviously local authority, police, health, etc. deliver their own training. So we've ensured there's a suite of training slides that have got in to ensure a consistency of messaging. And we've also really focused on trying to do some quite easy read resources as well that people have got access to, and undertaken quality assurance activity. In terms of the pathways work, Charlotte may have a different view on this, but I think this is one of our really big areas of work, and it's something that people quite struggle with, because what means safeguarding to statutory services may be very different to people's interpretation in non-statutory services. And so I think we really, really need to take the time to unpick that in terms of what that means across the partnership and across communities. And I think that's really come to the forefront actually within the COVID pandemic. So we have started on that piece of work, but it's certainly not something that we're going to solve within a 12-month period, because it is such a significant piece of work. One of the main things that was put in within the timescale covered by the report was something called the multi-agency risk management process. And that's a process which is for those people who are adults at risk. So we know that they meet the statutory criteria for adult social care, but they're actually not engaging with services for whatever reason that may be. So we've set up a whole process, multi-agency process, that can work with those people. And actually, we're currently in the middle of doing an audit of that process at the moment to look at the impact that that's had. We've also produced some urban dictionaries, and what we were finding was that, again, things like vulnerability meant things very differently across the partnership. So we were trying to ensure that we had a consistency of terminology and a consistency of use of language, because until we were all talking the same language, it was quite difficult to unpick some of those problems. So that's been put in. And again, we've done a lot of work around hoarding and self-neglect, and again, people's understanding of hoarding and self-neglect, and where that fits in kind of your safeguarding spectrum. Another piece of work that we did was specifically around vulnerable adults who had been victims of sexual violence. And that was a piece of work in terms of making sure that they had access to the SARC, the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. And we tried to make sure that that process was much more streamlined and easy, and that kind of work took place, which was really helpful. But all of those areas will continue to be worked on and have continued to be worked on since March 2020. The other area is our safeguarding adults reviews, and these are obviously the reviews that we undertake, statutory reviews, when we have had an adult who is at risk, and that's the definition we have to work to, who has died or been significantly abused, and there is learning to come from that case. And it can be learning that's very good learning and good practice, or it can be issues where there's been problems with multi-agency working. So we continue to have the statutory responsibility for those, but what we're currently doing is really looking at how we can make that process quicker. Any of you who will have had any experience of safeguarding adult reviews can know these can take months to complete, sometimes 12 months, and the learning is, we need to get that learning out much quicker. So we're looking at the moment and piloting some processes to be done with what they're calling reviews in real time, which are much quicker reviews, so we can get the learning out and into practice much quicker than the process that has been traditionally in place across the country, not just us. And we're part of some regional work that's looking at that at the moment. We've also really strengthened our learning from our case reviews to ensure that those are kind of making sure we're getting into the front line and the impact for people's practice as well. In terms of auditing and quality assurance, I'm really proud we're one of the few places in the country, or were in 2019, who had put in place a self-assessment process for services and agencies to assess themselves against their statutory responsibilities for safeguarding. Any of you who have ever worked in the field of children's will know this is a Section 11 that's been in place in children's for a long time, but there is not a comparable one that goes across into adults. So we decided that we were going to develop one, and I have to say our partnership have been very embracing of this and have joined in, and we've been asked to share that nationally with people, and that's been a really positive way forward. Likewise, we've continued to deliver our multi-agency training programme, and since the last annual report that you will have seen, there was a 55% increase in attendance in the previous year, and we're really building now on the work that we're delivering via the adults multi-agency safeguarding training. We're also ensuring where possible we deliver programmes that are across adults and children, so that we can think family as opposed to thinking adult, thinking children. So where possible and where the courses lend themselves to that approach, that's what we're doing. We also assess our impact on practice to make sure that what we're delivering does make a difference. And again, those have been really positively evaluated. Those are within the report. And we're continuing to see agencies submitting their single agency training for validation, so that again, we've got a consistency of approach. So we've done that's a very whistle-stop tour of the things that are contained within the annual report. If it would be helpful, I can just give you a very quick update on how we've taken things forward, like the sways and things since the COVID pandemic, just for your assurances. So the multi-agency training programme is one of the strengths of the partnership board, and we are had been totally reliant on delivering face-to-face training, which obviously posed a slight problem when we went into a lockdown in March. We realised quite quickly that one of the things we needed to get in place was some safeguarding training and awareness for people very quickly. So we developed we call it a suite of sways, SWAYS, which are basically PowerPoints with audio over the top of them that people can access and work through at their own pace. We have a suite now of them. I think we've got about 20 online at the moment, and we're still producing them regularly, that people can access in their own time. And if they're on night shifts, etc., they can access them in the middle of the night if needed. And I asked somebody within my service this morning for the latest figures, and to date we've had 10,919 views of the sways, which is phenomenal when you think that we only usually have about 3,000 people going through the face-to-face training. So I suppose one of the positives of the COVID pandemic for us as a service has been that we've seen a real gap here that we've managed to fill, and we will continue to utilise that post-pandemic. Obviously, the style of training is not suitable for all safeguarding topics, and we do pick and choose those topics that we put onto a sway. They're on a public website, so again we're conscious of what information people have access to. So certain subjects, we still continue to deliver face-to-face now via the virtual training platforms. So we are continuing with that, and the safeguarding is going forward. We've also worked really closely with our community colleagues through Adrian's teams in terms of the social media messaging that's been going out via the pandemic, and really focused on ensuring that we get those safeguarding messages out. So where at the beginning of the safeguarding, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing some referrals and things dropping off for services. We were really making sure that we were getting messages out to people to say, you still need to refer, this is still open, you still need to come to this place, this is what you still need to be looking out for. And the posts that we've been putting out, we had a reach of around 30,000 people. So kind of we've really been highlighting that domestic abuse, mental health, one of the things that we know as a partnership we need to be looking at. We've also ensured that we have safeguarding posters and information available at all of the vaccination sites that are now set up across the county. Thought that was a really good opportunity for us again to get some messaging and information out there. So we've worked with our colleagues in health to ensure that they're in all of the vaccination sites. And the other group of people who we have worked really closely with is the voluntary sector. We obviously found an awful lot of people in March who suddenly became community volunteers and were thrust into a situation that they probably hadn't worked in before. They weren't necessarily aware of what was safeguarding and what wasn't, where to go, what to do. So we worked with our partners both at the Peterborough and the Cambridgeshire end to ensure that we produced some bespoke community volunteer safeguarding training, and then we've continued to support those as the pandemic has progressed, to ensure that that's constantly updated and kept up to date. So we've worked as closely as we can with those, but again I think that's really forged some new relationships actually that have been really helpful. And the other group that's been very helpful for me to tap into is Adrian's CRG meetings when he's doing the COVID response to that. Again, it's really heightened our work with public health and other areas. So, and that's a very quick whistle stop tour. I should just say as well that throughout the pandemic, none of our meetings stopped. So the safeguarding meetings continued virtually. And obviously we ensured that within those meetings, we scrutinised people's responses through the pandemic and COVID, and ensuring that agencies were still meeting their safeguarding responsibilities, but also to take on board any issues that people may be having. So one of the things that we looked at was put around some guidance around non-use of PPE within care home settings and residential settings, just so we knew we had something if we needed to do it. So, and that's a very quick whistle stop tour. I'm not sure if that was helpful just in terms of where we are, but open up to any questions. But I am just conscious that the annual report is quite old in terms of the information that's on there.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I think that was, very useful and answered probably quite a lot of questions. We're going to try a different approach. So has anybody got any questions about the board, please, first? That's about the board. No. Okay, which is page 18 to 19. Okay, anybody got any questions on work of Safeguarding Partnership Board?
Sorry, Chairman, there are a few hands up. I don't know if they were in relation.
Yeah. Well, I think they went there. I think the problem is we agreed this anyway. Okay, Councillor Bisbee, we'll go for a different approach.
Yeah,
Councillor Bisbee, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Joe, excellent report. On page 17 of the report, page 20 of the whole tonight's papers, in relation to workshops. There's some salient comments from attendees. One of them is training cannot be improved. As you know, and we've just heard, you have actually improved a lot of things. But looking back on that particular time, what would you like to have improved that you haven't already? So what were the things that you were looking at and hoping to improve, please?
In terms of safeguarding generally, Councillor Bisbee, or around the training around safeguarding generally, I think it would be fair to say that there was lots and lots of meetings that were happening around COVID, and I think there was probably at the very start, because there's been a slight change in the structure. I think what we didn't focus on enough, and Charlotte may have a very different view on this, but I think we certainly got the messaging out very quickly. We tried to get the training sorted out quickly. We dealt with, we kind of engaged very quickly with our health colleagues and police colleagues and local authority colleagues, who are our 3 statutory partners. But I think what we probably could have looked at differently was things like the COVID within the prison population. I think that would have been a really helpful group of people to look at. And probably at the very, very outset, we probably should have focused much sooner on some of the care homes and residential settings. I don't know if Charlotte may have a different view to that.
May I come in, Chair?
Of course you can, Charlotte.
So yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think we've learned so much through the first peak of COVID, and I think there's a lot of things that I think we did really well. There's also quite a lot of learning. We've never been in a situation like that before, so I think we're now in a situation where we're much more sort of ready for the different scenarios and to think through the consequences of COVID for the different client groups. And sometimes with safeguarding, and I was actually talking to the team about this afternoon that run the multi-agency safeguarding hub. Sometimes things get described as a safeguarding issue, and actually they're just an issue that needs to be dealt with. And that's probably been one of our biggest challenges, actually, is that, you know, everyone's very aware at the moment of vulnerable people in the community. So lots of people get referred to as a safeguarding concern when actually it's a concern about an action that needs to be taken generally. So I think we have learned quite a lot, as Joe says, and particularly about client groups that maybe we haven't thought about as much in the last peak. And I think the Safeguarding Board is an excellent forum for gathering that learning and making sure that we do something positive with it.
Yeah, Adrian, did you want to come in, Adrian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to offer an extension really to Joe's response to Councillor Bisbee, but from a slightly different perspective, and that because Joe and her team are very humble, I'd like to just pay tribute, actually, if I may, to the way that the team and the safeguarding agenda have really come into the whole community-led response around COVID. Joe mentioned the Community Resilience Group. That meets fortnightly. It's a huge commitment, but Joe and her team have always been present. There are 44 people on the call today, and that has really exposed, I think, and improved the profile of safeguarding and the work of the Safeguarding Board. And really practically, Joe's team supporting our work with really vulnerable groups during COVID, so victims of domestic abuse, asylum seekers, rough sleepers, Gypsy Roma traveller communities, those people in our communities that are really isolated or potentially more vulnerable to risk. And for committee's reassurance, we are absolutely certain that the CRG, the Community Resilience Group, needs to continue way beyond the pandemic. It's too valuable a forum not to. And I think it's fair to say, Joe, isn't it, that you are now locked into that, whether you like it or not, actually, but you are locked into that. And hopefully we will, as partners, continue to get benefit in the same way that the safeguarding team and the safeguarding board will get benefit. It's a really valuable and powerful forum that feels like we've brought a lot of agendas together.
I would absolutely echo that, Adrian. I think what it's probably done is forced or maybe moved forward relationships that maybe would have taken slightly longer to forge had we not have been in the pandemic situation. And I think that's that's probably one of the few things I can say has been a benefit of the situation that we find ourselves in. But certainly I think once those relationships are built, and they're built on trust, and I think that there is a really good relationship of trust across those groups now, and certainly with us, we're seeing definitely different people contacting us about things that we wouldn't have seen before. So those were things I would have changed, Councillor Bisbee.
Can I just come back on that very quickly?
Yes, of course, Ray, yeah.
Yeah, I think Adrian knows me by now, is that I ask these questions so that you can actually do a really good job of selling yourself. I don't think there was necessarily, on my part, anything that I could see really wrong. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you do, because we have to look after our vulnerable people. And I'm glad to see that that's happening with the teams. And so I applaud you. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo what Ray says. It's great all the different parties are in communication, and it's going to stay that way. It's great news. Councillor Yazin, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe, for this for the report. I have two very quick questions. One's on the multi-agency training. So we've seen a 55% increase in the report in attendees. Have you identified the reasons why we've had that increase, and clearly what you and your team have done has worked, and what can we continue to do to up that percentage? That's my first question. And my second question is around the messaging that you've got on the vaccination sites. Again, excellent idea, but has that message been put out in different languages, or have we just put it out in English? And of course, we know Peterborough is such a diverse city with people speaking so many different languages, and we want to cover everyone.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, dealing with the training question. So my background was that before I came across to adults, I used to head up the children's safeguarding boards, which have obviously been around quite a lot longer than the adults boards. And so the children's training programme that we had in has been well established for a number of years across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So last year, and that move across for me had only recently taken place. And so we were just starting to put that training programme into place. So we were building from scratch really on the 2018 to 19 annual report, which is why you've seen the 55% increase this year. But we have increased it significantly again this year. So if I was giving you the figures today, as of today, there's almost another 50% increase since the annual report finished at the end of March. And that's really a case of us starting to lay the building blocks of the training back in 2018, and then just kind of everybody getting used to the training, taking small incremental steps, and us now really building on that. So if you look at the amount of courses that we have available now versus where it was 12 months ago or 24 months ago, there's much more variety available for people now, and kind of the messaging has got out by people, our reputation has got out to actually this is good training, you should go on it. So we are now seeing increases across all of our partners in terms of people attending the training, and obviously now with the sways as well, that's gone up even further. So that's kind of where it's come from really. It was that very kind of very incremental steps just in terms of just getting that training embedded, and for people to come to us and get used to us delivering it really, I suppose. Does that answer your question about training?
Yeah, if I can just come back on the training, now forgive me for my ignorance, I'm not 100% sure if is there any training available for counsellors, because of course although we may not be qualified, however we are the kind of first port of call for our residents in our individual wards, and often people that aren't aware that such services are there for support, they will come to us first. And if we were able to have that training available to us, maybe we could offer some support or even steer them in the right direction. So if the training isn't available, could something like that potentially be made available for us counsellors?
Absolutely. So in the past, we've had counsellors attend quite a lot of the different training courses that we've run. So you are more than welcome to attend any of the training sessions that we run. Or again, historically, we've run things specifically for counsellors. So the offer is there either way. You're either welcome to attend any of the training sessions that we run, and I'm more than happy post this meeting to send out details to you of all the different sessions that we run and how they're run and booking details, etc. Or if the decision is that you'd like us to come and do something for you as a group of counsellors, please let us know, and we're more than happy to facilitate that.
Excellent, thank you.
No problem. And in terms of the languages, all of our information that we hold, our website is available in 102 different languages. That's kind of one of the real benefits of the information on our website. So the information that we've supplied for the vaccination clinics equally is available in 102 different languages. So we've kind of passed that mantle almost over to the health providers to say you need to stick this kind of whatever information is most appropriate for the client group who are coming to your vaccination clinics. You can tailor that to that information.
Fabulous, thank you, and excellent work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor John Fox, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to what Charlotte said. I think it was words to the effect that we have learnt as nobody has been in this situation before. And I think that sums it up. It is so easy to criticise and find fault. But from the head person at the top in Parliament, the MP, not the MP, the Prime Minister, all the way down to the person of the lowest rank, if you want to call it that, everybody's learnt from this. And you will not hear 1 ounce of criticism from people like me, because it's got to be one of the hardest jobs you've all ever had. And I take my hat off to every single one of you. And I mean that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, that's very kind.
Quite right, John. All these officers should be commended that are here. Well, not just here tonight, but definitely the ones that are here tonight. The work they've done, it's unbelievable.
We're quick to criticise when things go wrong, and the public are at times. But
yeah, should praise as well.
People that are working hard and working their socks off, putting the hours they are in for the good of the whole community, and we should be thanking them from the bottom of our hearts.
Absolutely, John. Quite agree. Any more questions, please? Don't see any more hands. John, yours is still up. That's okay. 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 If there's no further questions, I'd like to note the recommendation in the report, which is for the committee to receive and note the content of the annual report. Are the committee satisfied that we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object. Okay, no one objects. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Charlotte. If you can, more than welcome to leave the meeting now. We really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll stay for this next item.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 6, mental health section 75 partnership agreement annual report, pages 35 to 46. I'd like to welcome the following officers who are in attendance to assist with the presentation: Sarah By, Senior Commissioner Early Intervention and Prevention and Mental Health; Shauna Torrance, Head of Adult Social Care Commissioning; Debbie Smith, Director of Operations and System Partnerships, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust; Shona Britton, Professional Lead for Social Work, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust. Okay, who would like to do an overview? Because there's a few of you.
Could I just explain why there are four people? So this is as members will remember from previous committees, this is a partnership arrangement with the local authority has with CPFT. So for that reason, it's really helpful to have representatives from the Commissioning Directorate, but also representatives from CPFT, because I know members often have broader questions about mental health services, and so we felt it would be good to have CPFT colleagues also who will answer those questions wherever they're able to. So I think Sarah is probably going to lead on the report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for allowing us to talk to you this evening about the Section 75 agreement. As Charlotte says, I'll be presenting an overview of the report, but I'll be ably assisted by my colleagues in terms of answering any questions that you may have. So the report I'm presenting this evening outlines the performance of the Section 75 Partnership Agreement for Mental Health over an 18-month period, and that covers from the 1st of April 2019 to September 2020. The overall activity and performance data is detailed within the report and covers the number of people that the service has been supported and also the cost of care. The financial commitments outlined in the report fund the wide range of care and support arrangements which meet the assessed needs of service users. I also wanted to highlight some key areas in the report. Firstly, section 4.6 provides some details about the impact of the pandemic and how the social work service adapted very, very quickly, as we all had to do, to ensure the continuation of the delivery of statutory functions during this period, and continues to adapt as we move through the various phases of the pandemic. Section 4.6 also details performance against the annual work plan. This sits within the Section 75 agreement and is a range of priorities that we develop between the local authority and CPFT to make sure that we're continuing to improve and develop the functions that are being delivered. The report shows the work that's been undertaken to improve the operational model, practice and management arrangements of the service, as well as maintaining and improving the quality of social work practice. We've also provided an overview of a new development for mental health in Peterborough. This is a pilot project which is funded through NHS England, and it aims to expand the community mental health provision across 3 primary care network areas within Peterborough. It's called the Exemplar Project, and you may have come across it within your work. The Exemplar Project aims to expand the mental health clinical and social support at the earliest possible point of somebody's individual journey. So the local authority will be commissioning 3 social workers who will be recruited to deliver statutory functions, as well as raising awareness of the social care agenda across the pathway. And that will be aiming to reduce, prevent or delay the need for more formal social care interventions. So that project's in development. There's quite a lot of work that's happening around that. There's a new website and kind of interactive platform that's been developed called How Are You Peterborough? So that's kind of part of all of the development work, and our social workers will sit within that to make sure that as well as in implementing kind of statutory social work, we're also making sure that our social care agenda is highlighted across health pathways, as well as through our kind of voluntary sector interactions as well. Commissioners are now working with CPFT to develop the priorities for the next 12 to 18 months, which will form the annual plan into 2021, and to ensure that the Section 75 agreement continues to deliver the delegated function to a high standard, but with appropriate oversight and quality. That's just an overview of the report that's been presented and in your pack tonight. So I'm happy to take any questions that hopefully either I or my colleagues will be able to answer.
Okay, thank you. Open up to questions. Okay, Councillor Julie Howell, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to say your work is superb. I'm a user of the mental health services at the moment, and having been so in the past, seeing the transition to doing everything online, it's just been amazing. There's been no difference. There's been no difference in the quality of service or delay or anything like that. And that's an incredible achievement under these circumstances. So thank you. And thank you for all you've done for our communities as well. It's been terrific. I had a question about your KPIs. It's at 4.3. The proportion of adults in contact with secondary mental health services living independently is 84.7 against a 75% target. And I wondered if you could tell us what accounts for this success.
I can probably talk a little bit about the commissioning, but Shona may well also want to talk about kind of the practice side of that. And I think it's really about making sure that we are providing the least restrictive options for people, so that we're ensuring that the care and support that we're commissioning is meeting somebody's needs at the kind of earliest possible point, so that we don't need to talk to people about kind of the kind of higher end needs that they may have to get to if their kind of mental health is deteriorating. So I think we, as a social work service, and Shona will be able to kind of come in on this, would be always looking for that kind of least restrictive option and making sure that we are ensuring people can live as independently as possible. Shona, did you want to pick up on anything?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Councillor Howell. I think one of the key priorities, and it's demonstrated in another part of the report actually, that particularly for working age adults, the key priority at all times is to look for community-based solutions that, you know, really enable that individual to keep control of their own life, to actually be based within their own community networks and build from their own home. So I think that does account for our performance above target. And I think adding into that with the, you know, as the exemplar project for Peterborough develops, we should see more and more positive outcomes for people.
Fantastic. Can I just add something to that, please, Chair?
Of course you may.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that, how are you, Peterborough? From a councillor's point of view, you know, we're used to seeing people quite often in their homes, then we kind of notice things and conversations may develop that may lead to, you know, some kind of referral or signposting. It's different now, of course. We're not out. I'm one of those who has to stay at home all the time. I think I was at home 6 months of last year. So it's all over the phone. And what I am noticing is a real difference in people will ring me about X, but it turns out it's really Y that they want to talk about. They'll ring me because it's practical, but really there may be a mental health issue in there. And I wondered if you had any comments on that, and maybe, you know, is there any guidance available for us as councillors, because we want to do a good job of referring people to you, as you've said, at the earliest opportunity possible.
Could I suggest that Debbie picks that up? Is that all right with you, Debbie?
Yes, sorry, trying to unmute myself. Yes, I mean, we would want you to refer as early as possible, whether that's into the exemplar, and we can make the numbers available for that, or through into our primary care mental health services, or IAP services, as they might already also be known, to allow people to have an assessment and see if there are any need for early interventions. And we'll be promoting that more and more. I think one of the things that we're really concerned about is the impact of coming out of this pandemic. I think at the moment everybody is focusing on physical health, rightly so, making sure we're protecting people, but the impact of that on people's mental health going forward is going to be really concerning, and we need to be picking people up as soon as possible to get those interventions in.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah, quite agree. Councillor Raybisby.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for the report and for the work that you've been doing. There are two areas that I'm really interested in. One is, what about the out of hours mental health? How is that being impacted at the moment? And the other one is the transition from child to adult mental health services. How is that being impacted, and what have you got in place to assist with that, please?
Shona, did you want to pick that up?
I can pick up the transitions question, if that's okay, Councillor Bisbee, and then perhaps Debbie can pick up the out of hours mental health services. So in terms of transitions from children's to adults social work services, that's a key priority that's in the work plan. We've now got a fully operational work programme in place, which is going to work alongside both our social work, children and young people's colleagues, as well as our own colleagues within the health service and our what are referred to as tier 4 inpatient services for young people, so that we pick people up at the right time. We actually support them and their families or carers in understanding where the pathway lies and what the transition will be. We began this last year and have had some quite positive experiences with a couple of young people who have quite complex needs. So it's a work plan priority, but we've also started the conversations and have already been able to achieve a couple, some really good outcomes for young people. I'll hand over to Debbie in terms of out of hours health services.
Thanks, Shona. All of our out of hours mental health services have been maintained right the way through the pandemic and continue to do so. And that includes those that require Mental Health Act assessments as well. As this particular wave of the pandemic has increased, we've actually extended our out of hours services, enhancing them with additional staff. We've supported our acute colleagues with a mental health emergency department, which is away from the acute hospitals to prevent people having to go into the hospital and the risk, obviously with the risk of COVID. And in this last week, we've supported ambulances with mental health staff in their cars to try and help alleviate some mental health problems straight at source and make sure that people get to the right place rather than being conveyed to hospital if that's not necessary. And that's also, the enhancements also allowed us to look at 1 hour response times for all of our emergencies out of hours. So we've done quite a bit of work around that, and we'll be evaluating all of that as we go forward.
Can I just, Ms. Joan?
Councillor,
no, I think you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much. And I applaud you all, but I just think that coming out of this, I wouldn't like your job, because I think you're quite right in people are looking at their physical health, and it's going to be afterwards when we see the impact on mental health. So thank you very much, and good work.
Councillor Ikra Yazin, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. My question is on 4.4, which addresses staffing. The report suggests that we've had some challenging times when it comes to staffing. Have you identified the reason as to why we are having those challenges, and what could we do better, or what could we change to address that?
Would you like me to answer that one, Sarah? So historically, we've used traditional media to advertise vacancies. We're now making far greater use of We Love Social Work and tapping into all of the mobile apps to attract staff. And we've seen quite an increase in interest in our posts. To the extent that actually the current vacancies that we have, we are in the process of shortlisting, interviewing and recruiting to, I think, each one of those posts. The senior practitioner post that's mentioned in the report, we actually converted what had been a different type of post into the senior practitioner post, and that's proved of interest to far more people. We found people weren't interested in what had been referred to as a team leader post, but from a professional point of view are interested in the senior practitioner. So I think the use of a variety of media, social media platforms, and actually a refocusing of a couple of the roles has actually made them more attractive.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions on this report, please? No, okay, no hands are up. Okay, I'd like to note the recommendation in the report, which are for the committee to endorse the report as a full account of service and financial performance, activity and outcomes under the Section 75 Partnership Agreement. Are the committee satisfied that we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object, please. Okay, we appear to have no objections. Okay, the officers that are not involved anymore are happy. I'm happy for them to leave. I'd just like to thank you for the work. You keep up the great work, to be honest. Just keep up the good work. Thank you. Really appreciated by this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 7, portfolio holder progress report, communities, pages 47 to 60. I'd like to welcome Councillor Irene Walsh Appreciate you attending this evening. And also, I think you're supported by Anna Jack, Head of Youth Support Services, Peter Gell, Assistant Director, Regulator Services, Matt Oliver, Head of Think Communities, and Rob Hill, Assistant Director of Community Safety. I don't know who are you going to, Maureen, are you going to do an overview?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I will. Good evening, members, and yes, I do appreciate the opportunity, together with a strong team of officers, to present the work carried out in my portfolio area and to hear your views and questions. So unsurprisingly, I will first of all mention the work around COVID and how the important groundwork done in building the Think Communities approach has really stood us in good stead. The sterling work carried out by officers and staff throughout the current pandemic has helped deliver a very effective rapid response programme and model of community support. The county and Peterborough City Hub were able to respond very quickly to the many calls for assistance that they received and provide support to people who were shielding or having problems in accessing food or getting help with other issues. Importantly, the hubs were very much dependent on a partnership approach, working with over 90 voluntary and community organisations, and of course, good communications with residents has been key in reaching those in need of help. So as you're most likely aware, a number of community safety team members were redeployed from their day jobs and covered a variety of roles as part of the council's response to the pandemic. Currently, much of this work is around COVID compliance, although there are now COVID marshals working at various locations around the city, ensuring that our residents are staying safe, and you may have seen some of them. Trading standards officers were involved in checking the safety of PPE equipment destined for use in adult social care and ensuring COVID compliance by the city's businesses. The team also piloted very successfully an enhanced contact tracing scheme and worked in partnership at sports grounds to ensure the safety of the public attending events. There has been activity around animal welfare, also as a result of the pandemic, with an increase in the number of families buying puppies, some of which were found to have been illegally imported. So during the course of 2020, there was an increase in reporting of domestic violence. In response to this, a strong victim-focused approach has been taken by the various partners involved, resulting in a much more robust system being put in place to support the victims of this really terrible crime. Turning to business as usual, the PES team is now fully engaged in an enhanced response to antisocial behaviour and quality of life issues. The formation of the problem-solving group, which is detailed in your reports, is, in my view, one of the best partnership initiatives to come forward in recent times. And I hope you will pose some questions on this to myself and/or officers. The establishment here in Peterborough of Counting Every Adult is another very positive programme of work made possible by government funding. The approach will work to support people of multiple disadvantage. The Youth Offending Service has worked hard over the past year, and I'm pleased to say that following an inspection of the partnership, an overall good rating was achieved, with some areas of outstanding practice. And this, I believe, is testament to the commitment and professionalism of the YOS team. Turning to a couple of other areas of work within my portfolio, the Community Asset Transfer Programme has achieved a considerable degree of success, although COVID has slowed down progress during 2020. And we will continue working with community and other centres to achieve the best possible outcomes and sustainable future for the benefit of local communities. The selective licensing scheme has, I'm sure you will agree, brought a substantial improvement for tenants throughout the city. This scheme is currently under review with a view to a replacement scheme to take effect from October of this year. This committee will be consulted on this in due course. The cumulative impact policy, another scheme that has brought benefit to the communities affected by alcohol sales, was reviewed during 2020 and has resulted in off-license sales being subject to the conditions in the policy. So finally, I'd like to mention the work carried out by the Cambridge and Peterborough Against Scams partnership to promote awareness of and protect our communities from criminals who target the most vulnerable. I believe the situation has worsened considerably during the pandemic, and I can only say how strongly I support the work taking place to bring the perpetrators to justice. I think I'll leave it there, Chair, and leave something for my officer to say as well. And I hand back to yourself, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Irene. Did any of the officers want to say anything before we go to questions, please? Adrian.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Walsh's summary was exemplary, of course, but I would just turn committee's attention to some conversations that she and I have been having, and I've been in turn having with the team around the future, which is sort of developing at some pace after the report was written. And we do think we need to turn our attention now to addressing the impact of COVID on families and individuals who may have been hard hit by the economic consequences, particularly, but also the inequalities that might have been worsened as a result of COVID. So during the course of the next municipal year, with agreement of the committee, we'd like to bring a report forward fairly early on to explore this issue in a bit more detail and to talk practically about how we propose to take a lead role across our organisation and across our partnerships to really get a firm grip on this issue of helping people recover. We're not there yet, of course. We're still dealing with the real impacts of COVID, but we do need to turn our attention, I think, fairly quickly, which I know Councillor Walsh supports, to recovery. So I just wanted to put that into the discussion for this evening.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, thank you. John Howard, please.
Thank you. I've got two questions, if I may, Chair. Is that all right?
Yes, that's no problem at all.
Thank you. The first one is the hub. I mean, we can't really commend or praise it enough, I don't think. The work has been incredible, and it's the embodiment of Think Communities, really. Adrian did allude to this earlier, and I'm really pleased to hear it, because it was one of my questions was, I hope the hub carries on in some form afterwards, if only just to help coordinate local volunteer groups that they've obviously got to know so well. So yeah, my question was going to be, I hope the hub continues in some form, but I think, Adrian, you've already alluded to that, in fairness to you, and I'm really pleased that is the case. If I go to my second question, because that is more of a question really, on the pest service and the sort of COVID marshal service, are we already assisting the supermarkets, or is that something we'll be looking to do? Because it seems to me like that's probably one of the last sort of main areas where the public can still meet in a number, and it seems like the stores probably do need some help when it comes to mask wearing or people shopping in groups where ideally they should be shopping on their own wherever they can. And I just wondered if the pest service was offering supermarkets any help on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. If I can take that, please. So firstly, you'll be aware that through the rapid response team, it's so much more than the pest service, how we respond to this particular challenge across Peterborough. And I'm proud to say that I'm part of a number of different organisations that are working towards this particular challenge of COVID. But in response to supermarkets, reassuringly, yes, that's very, very much on our radar. Our data says that we do need to do a lot of focus and support around those supermarkets. You'll be aware that we've got a strong contingent of marshals who are helping us with that. But it's also, when I talk about other council services and partners, it's around the business intervention, which is absolutely critical at this time. Peter Joel might want to add some more on that, but there is a programme of events ongoing at the moment to engage with all the key supermarkets to make sure that they understand fully what is expected and given guidance and support, but then we're there on hand to support in terms of compliance when it's needed as well.
Yes, for me, Chair, just to add to that, actually, it was a very good question. And those visits are actually started. So we have been throughout speaking to supermarkets, but there is a specific focus, as Robert's just mentioned, there on them at the moment. And we are in the process of doing that. As I say, they are happening, but it's not just around compliance, as we know. We've heard, and only yesterday, actually, was in conversations with Adrian, again, with new members, has raised was concerns in relation to deliveries. So we are very much wanted to know if deliveries are getting cancelled. Is there any support needed around that? Is it an isolated incident? Are they making inquiries around cancellations as to whether the party that should be recipient of that food, are they particularly vulnerable at this moment? And can support measures being put in around that? So I think there's some wraparound work that we need to do with this as well, but actually compliance, because we know large people do meet in supermarkets, one of those places at the moment that have remained open throughout. So yes, we are getting around those.
That's brilliant information. Thank you ever so much to you. Thank you.
Councillor Ravensby, please.
Thank you. I'd like to make three major comments, but I think an overall comment is I think that all the things like Think Communities, having that in the beginning has actually really helped the council to respond to COVID. But the three things that I really want to raise are community asset transfers. We've seen quite a lot of people actually volunteering through COVID. I'm just wondering whether there's any opportunities there to actually get those people to actually start taking an interest in the community assets transfer. That may be somewhere where we can work. Then about scams, there's lots of people working from home, school children working from home on computers, on mobile phones, and I'm very interested in obviously grooming and all the different scams that can happen, and if we're getting any reports that we wouldn't expect normally. And then the last one is domestic violence, and we all know, and the theme that most people hear is adult to adult, male to female, but it's also female to male. And also what we're seeing is child to adult, especially in lockdown where tensions are rising. So I just wondered what the figures were around that. But overall, I just want to thank you all for the fantastic work that you've done. Thank you.
Chair, if I, unless
Yes,
Councillor Walsh wants to come in, just perhaps deal with the community asset transfer issue first, and then hand to Matt to pick up the scams question, and then Rob for the rest of the use items.
You go ahead, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. I absolutely agree with you that the response from volunteers throughout the pandemic has been overwhelmingly positive, and volunteers across Peterborough haven't waited to be asked. They've really stepped up and have done some incredible work, and I'm absolutely certain that Peterborough's success in trying to stem the incoming virus is in no small part due to that small army, quite large army actually, of volunteers that are working 7 days a week flat out. And it has built up an incredible resilience in many of our communities. It's brought communities together. It's helping isolation and loneliness, and also offering practical support. And therefore, people are learning new skills. And we are seeing lots of our volunteers now coming forward to take on more active roles. So I do agree with you. I think it's only a matter of time, actually, with the right support through Matt's service, to nurture some of those volunteers, those that want it. Not everyone will. Some will just be happy to do a couple of hours once a week or once a month, but many, I think, have recognised that they've got more of an active role to play. I think with the right nurturing, the right support, the right development, we could well see issues such as community centre management becoming the next natural stage. And in fact, our MP has been in touch about a particular group that was stood up at the start of the pandemic in Peterborough. They are now interested in doing exactly as you described, taking over the lease of a community building, because they've recognised that they've got a huge role to play, both during the pandemic and beyond. So watch this space. I'm really excited actually about the prospects for our volunteer community in Peterborough, and I think we could see what's already happening across Peterborough just get better and better and better. I hope that's helpful. Matt, perhaps you could pick up scams.
Yeah, I will. And just to echo what you said about community asset transfer, I think timing is everything with that. And as we come out and confidence is gained around taking over buildings with support, I think it's difficult to see that right now with the challenges that are faced by the whole landscape, but absolutely with the right timing, I think that's spot on. And with regard to scams, I think that's a really interesting point, Councillor Bisbee, because this is a cross-cutting issue. And if we had Joe here to sort of talk about the safeguarding aspects of kind of online grooming, I suppose I haven't picked up any particular kind of concerns through the Against Scams partnership, but I think it's an area to look into, because the good thing is that Joe attends the CRG and is able to pick up all of those, the community resilience group, and is able to pick up all of those kind of issues from the wider partnership about anything that's happening alongside our other services as well. But I do think that maybe if I can bring together Joe and our kind of Against Scams partnership work, then we could take a look at that for you to see whether there's some information that we could get around that, if that's okay.
For me, Chair, I can also add to that. So the scams work, as Matt has said, actually just cut across a range of services, so everything from action fraud, a national body set up by the police to look at large scale scams and scams emanating abroad. Very much as Matt has said there, we've got that local partnership which has been worked really well across both Peterborough and Cambridge as far as getting information out to communities quickly when scams have become apparent, and there's been a lot of sort of profile around that. But scams, again, depending on the nature of them, very much cuts across sort of local policing. They can fall within sort of trading standards remit, and some of the scams can be sort of goods and service related. So each year, trading standards will take a number of matters through the courts, where you've got goods and services associated with those, and we've got a number that will go into Crown Court. We've got some dates again. Those courts start really moving going forward, and that's because we've got some significant financial loss here, where vulnerable adults usually have been conned out at quite significant sums of money. So scams takes a number of guises in a number of forms, but it is really important that you can only really address those with a big partnership approach. That it's something that is high on the agenda, and I think we'll just continue to have a real sort of focus on that going forward.
Thank you for that. Councillor Amjad Iqbal, please.
Sorry. Chair, I have a few questions. Can I ask them in one go?
You may.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Councillor Walsh for her report, and I would also like to thank her dedicated team as well. My first question is on section 4.2.1 about the selective license scheme. Now, what I note that the licensed properties were about 7,623. So my question would be, how much revenue did we generate from the scheme, from those properties, and how much of that was spent to actually deliver the scheme? Then the second question is that they talk about the behaviour change as a result of the scheme. My question would be, if you can give me some examples, what sort of behaviour has changed in terms of the landlords or the tenants? And they also state that the prosecution rate, there was no formal prosecution as a result of the scheme. My question is that, what was the prosecution rate prior to the scheme being introduced?
So if I may answer that, Chair. Some of that information we haven't got to me today, but we can certainly get that to you. So the overall revenue derived, I haven't got a sum with me, but what I can say, that funding has gone directly into funding the costs of those officers that have been delivering that service. It's very much ploughed back into the service, and the aim is about raising standards. That is what it has all been about from the start. So from a behaviour perspective, what we have been seeing is greater compliance. That's what we're trying to achieve, and it's all around good quality housing standards. And yes, there's still work to go. That's why we're reviewing the scheme. That's why the anticipation is that the scheme will continue, and the evidence today that we've been gathering demonstrates that. But from a real, I suppose the worst case scenario, we're looking at sort of significant, what we call category 1 hazards. So, you know, sort of the really fundamentals that you need around the home, around your heating, you know, safe fire exits where you've got housing multiple occupancy. You know, we don't have these sort of things. These are areas that we need to address. So it's fair to say that there have been some improvements in that sense as to general compliance, but there is still work to be done. You know, I think no one is looking at it and saying, actually, it's a done deal, it's achieved everything we want. If we were there, then the scheme would not be able to continue, because actually you've got to demonstrate, first of all, that the scheme itself is making some progress. And if it's making some progress, there's still work to be done. And that is what the evidence is demonstrating to us today. As far as the prosecution, it's interesting from a regulatory perspective. I'm responsible for a number of regulatory services, and the various enforcement powers provided for the different services do vary. The prosecution is quite a sort of a heavy, blunt tool at the end of that as a final sanction. What some of the newer provisions have given, and again through the licensing divisions, we've got other ways to try and address and achieve compliance. And I think it's fair to say that the majority of businesses in that sense want to comply and want to get things right. So it's very much around supporting, giving advice, and ultimately, if that doesn't work, then what we want is a range and proportionate approach where you effectively increase those sanctions as necessary to get compliance. So we still have an option around prosecution, but I think essentially we're saying in the report that with the tools that we have in our box at the moment, we're able to achieve compliance without that. So we're very much in the process, as I say, of gathering the evidence. There will be a paper coming back to the committee. It's really important that we consult with you around proposals going forward, and that's really part of the consultation process that will follow this. And what I do expect is that there will be some tweaking around the edges as far as the area that will be within scope, and that's very much will be data led. There's quite a few criteria that have to be met, but I think you'll see on the basis of that some creeping around the edges of the current localities where the evidence is suggesting actually that needs to spread a bit wider. But those areas will be part of the discussion that comes back to you.
Thank you. I've got a question regarding the COVID marshals. Now, I've seen them around in Central Ward. My question is, how effective are they and in increasing the awareness of social distancing and compliance? What sort of feedback has the council got from the local public members and the businesses?
Thank you, Councillor. Val, I'll take that if I can. So the COVID marshals, just for clarity, we've got 30 operating across the city at the moment. 20 of those come from agency provision. We were given some grant funding, which helped us get specialist marshals into the city, and 10 are basically using our existing PES resources to supplement that. So they've been operating, well, we've been operating marshals for many months now, but at that number only since late November. Throughout that time, we've had a real robust system in place with them in terms of making sure that we're having daily reports back to us, that we are the people briefing the whole team of where the issues are. And that's not just done on a wing and a prayer, that's scientifically based according to the epidemiology and where we're getting the calls for the service and the demands. So based on the facts and the science around where COVID spread is, but also on the soft intelligence that we get from the community at large to say where there's issues. So we have quite a quick ability to deploy them into those areas and get feedback. And I think it's fair to say they were a new thing for the city. By and large, we've had fantastic feedback about how they're operating. Again, for clarity, COVID marshals don't have powers of enforcement. but they are expected to engage and explain and give advice to the public, which they've been doing. And the feedback we've been getting has been really good. There have been incidents over the 3 or 4 month period where marshals, we've had negative feedback about them persistently visiting the same types of premises, etc. But we've dealt with that where there's been an issue. By and large, that has been necessary, where we've had repeat offenders and we've had to go in and keep hammering that issue, because at the end of the day, we have to ensure that safety. So as by way of reassurance, I'm really confident that the marshals are doing a fantastic job for Peterborough. They're increasing visibility. I should be clear, in terms of their deployment, they are a resource for the whole city. Councillor Boyce will know that we had a conversation last week about a wider challenge. We're now starting to see issues in our beauty spots in the rural areas of Peterborough. So we were very quickly able to react to that and have people out in the likes of Fairy Meadows and some of our dog walking areas to start to pump home that message. So big thumbs up from me. I think the feedback's been overall very good.
Thank you, Chair. My final question was on DV. Majority of the community support groups welcome the advances made by the PCC on domestic abuse. However, they still have concerns and believe more could be done to support survivors in our community, to ensure that when someone seeks support, they are given the support and advice they need to make an informed decision. So I would like officers to make a comment on that. What do they have to say to that? And in terms of Think Communities, if PCC is already applying or is considering applying the principles of Think Communities to domestic abuse.
Thank you. In terms of domestic abuse, so as it mentioned in the report, we've maintained focus throughout on our services around domestic abuse. We've made sure that where there has been redeployment of other council resources, that has not happened. And I know that's the same for across the partnership. In terms of providing support and guidance, that's been absolutely paramount to us. And you may have seen in November, we agreed with the Peterborough Telegraph to we've launched a campaign of domestic violence awareness across the city, which is still ongoing. There's regular articles around this, and we're pumping out and pushing out the information so that people know where to go to get support. It is available, and the strong message from us is that come to us and we will give you that guidance and help when you need it. In terms of the support services available to us, we've increased in Peterborough City our IFA service throughout the COVID pandemic, using COVID funding to help with that, because we know that demand has risen. But also we've provided support to outreach services, which aren't council run, but provided by Refuge, etc. We've provided support to them, and the police partnerships helped us with that as well, in flexing their resource. I do want to pick up an earlier question, which I wasn't able to answer by Councillor Bisbee. We moved on, but there was a question around how are we reaching out. We acknowledge the male-female violence is the same provision there for female-female, but also child to adult. And the answer to that is yes, very much. We are making sure we're emphasising that support is there for all through that communications campaign that we're doing at the moment. But I've also, through the partnership, domestic abuse partnership, we've agreed we are going to resource extra specialist officers to deal with the issue of child to parent domestic abuse, which is massively unreported and is a real issue. So we want the specialist resource to deal with that. I think that answers the first part. Could you just repeat the second part, Councillor Iqbal?
The second part was if PCC is already applying or is considering to apply the principles of Think Communities to domestic abuse.
I can make a comment just to give an example, if that helps to reassure members. So this specific kind of case study that I can mention shows that the Peterborough Hub, although it has its specific sort of cohorts around clinically extremely vulnerable and others who are in hardship and self-isolation, we've also seen through the kind of join up between officers and services that we've had other referrals, and we've most definitely, the community has seen referrals come into the hub for support for people who are fleeing domestic violence. And I definitely know a couple off the top of my head where we've used a community response to enable that to happen. And the actually had a letter written back from that victim to thank the local community for their support. So actually it's a much better outcome than using just our normal services, because that person has felt supported by their local community. They feel like they've got a link into their local community. It's more upstream in terms of support, and it generally just felt like a really good thing to do. So we are kind of linking in there. I think there's probably more systemic things that we can do, Councillor Iqbal, in terms of communications to let people know that the hub is there. But we also have great representation from the Women's Centre and the like on the Peterborough Safer Peterborough Partnership Delivery Group as well, which is where all the community organisations sit and work out those kind of issues. So that's just from my end of the spectrum. I didn't know if Rob wants to sort of add anything to that.
No, thank you. I think that covers it really well. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, Councillor Ikra Yazin, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I have two questions, one on scams and one on domestic violence. Do you want me to ask them one by one?
Ask them both together.
Yeah. Okay. So they're both around awareness. So I'll start off with scams. Well, the elderly population and our elderly residents are more at risk of becoming a victim to scams. And I can see from the report that we are raising awareness. I just wanted to ask, what platforms are we using to raise awareness? Because if it's like a social media or online based campaign, a lot of the elder residents either don't know how to use a computer or don't have access to the internet. So there's a lot of vital piece of information that they could possibly miss. So have we explored any other ways of raising awareness which they can also have access to? And then in terms of my question on domestic violence, it's again on raising awareness. We are an extremely diverse city, and I know there's campaigns that have launched to raise awareness of the support and the services that are available. Have we put out information in various different languages? I know the demand is increasing with COVID and lockdown. So there are two questions.
So in terms of scams, if I can respond, I suppose that's the joy of the partnership. And the joy of the partnership is that it has hundreds of members in it, and it's growing every day, and they all know the cohorts of the people that they engage with. So I think that gives us a really flexible way of talking to people. So, you know, if it's Age UK, then they will know the most appropriate communications methods to use to reach out to those people. I think that definitely you can see that there's a lot of social media kind of comms that goes out. I don't think we would deny that happens, but I'm confident that we're reaching out in lots of different medias through those organisations. And if anybody had a worry about that, then that they would come back to us and say, you know, could we use a different format? So that's how I would say we would approach that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
go on, sorry, Rob.
Sorry, Chair. So the answer is yes. I mean, all of our focus is around making sure we can reach all communities across Peterborough. The comms campaign is very much angled in various different languages. Joe's left now, but the safeguarding website carries a lot of our messaging in those 102 different languages as well. And we this year, I mentioned that we've recruited extra resources. That was in response to, in fact, a previous scrutiny where we discussed the issue in our migrant communities. So we've got a specialist A8 Idva now joined us, who cuts across all the eastern countries, if you like, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, etc., etc. But we're also doing a lot of targeted work within the faith areas and settings as well at the moment, which is really helping us get into communities that probably are not aware of what's available to them.
Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work. Honestly, I know a lot of us have said that, but we do mean it from the bottom of our heart. We know exactly how exhausted you guys are with the extremely difficult situations that we're in and increasing demand, and literally not once have you guys slowed down. So thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Angus Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers and Councillor Walsh for the report and all the different items in it. I've just got one question. I did have a few more, but they've been answered already. Well, one or two of them. On page 52, selective licensing scheme, I want to ask a question regarding the future of it. At the moment, the selective licensing scheme just covers certain areas of Peterborough. As a ward councillor for Bretton, and also I understand there's other areas outside of city centre which aren't covered, which have this issue as well. So it's around the number of multiple occupied properties, houses of multiple occupation, where a selective licensing scheme, if implemented, could help with some of the issues from either the landlords or, in some cases, the residents in those houses of multiple occupation. I say in some cases because I used to live in HMO, so it's not everybody, it's just some. Also want to, whilst I'm asking this question, I just want to flag up, back in July 2019, I raised a motion which is connected to this regarding Article 4, which is where they decide, which gives powers to councils for properties of over 6 dwellings to decide if they can be turned into houses of multiple occupation. Because I know we've got quite a few now. It's about deciding if a house should be turned into HMO in relation to area utilities, amenities, car parking, and other issues. So it's quite important. So I'm pleased to see that we have got more of an update now. Obviously, there's been a lot more important things going on lately with COVID. And it's going to be, we're looking at perhaps renewing it, and I hope to extend it in October to areas like Bretton and elsewhere in Peterborough. So if I could just, I think it maybe Rob Hill, who may be able to answer my question, or if everybody else can, and also the question around the Article 4, which I understand why the motion did ask for a report back by the end of 2020 municipal year, but obviously because of COVID, other things have been more important lately. But I just want to comment about that as well, please. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, Article 4 is something we'll have to look into in further detail, because I'm not party to probably the discussions in relation to that, and also there's very much sort of planning and policy related attributes to that. But certainly we can go back to look into that with a report coming back to you on that matter. Again, just reassurances in relation to the current scheme. There is a requirement to review the scheme that we have in place at certain frequencies, and that's why we are reviewing it at the moment. And that review does take into consideration all the sort of available data. There is very much certain criteria that must be met to enable you to implement a scheme, and we do require Secretary of State approval. So it's not just a local discretionary decision as to sort of the scope and what we can include within it. But absolutely, we are reviewing it. If the data actually identifies, and we should, there will be, from what I know at the moment, there will be some drift that we said earlier as far as the scope. What I can't say at the moment whether that will include sort of the locality that you mentioned, but actually if it meets the criteria, then absolutely that will be part of the consultation, and that'll be something that no doubt you have a keen interest to feedback on. But we really are keen to ensure that where there are areas that we feel would benefit from that those communities and businesses in those settings have an opportunity to say whether they think that's something that they also feel would work for them.
Thank you.
Councillor Ellis, is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yeah, if they can send me, send an update about Article 4 in writing, that'd be great.
Okay, can I just remind members to try and avoid ward-related questions? It's happened a couple of times tonight. If you can just avoid, make it more general of the whole of Peterborough, please. Okay, Councillor Julie Howe, please.
That was just an example, Bretton. There's other wards like wards.
No, it's just that we are trying not to make it ward-related. Thank you. Councillor Julie Howe.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Walsh, for the report, and also to all the teams for their sterling work. You've heard how much we appreciate it. I just wanted to pick up on something Peter Gell said a little earlier about this issue of supermarkets failing to, when people are putting in deliveries because there's slots available, and then the supermarkets are cancelling on the day for various reasons, which is meaning people are ending up with no food. Which can actually create a crisis for people who don't usually fall into crisis for any reason. So thank you for picking up that issue, because it's something that's that I wasn't aware of, and it's really, apparently it's a thing. So thank you for your work on that. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question actually, following on about what Councillor Yassine was saying about communication, and it's about leaflets. As you know, I think most councillors would agree, there's nothing more powerful than a leaflet for getting information out to all residents. There's been some, banter, political banter back and forth in the press, nationally and locally recently, about whether politicians should be leafleting during lockdown, etc. But, I have a personal opinion on that. But what does this present for you? For your communications, for the council, for your teams, when you need to get information out to residents and remind residents about lockdown and the rules, etc. Are you leafleting? Have you got rules for yourselves on leafleting? What's your position on it, please?
Chair, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
That's right, Adrian, no problem.
Like me, I'll respond on this one initially. I agree with you, actually, that there's nothing better than something landing in your letterbox in your own home as a way of really getting messages across. And right at the start of the pandemic in particular, we did issue a leaflet to every single property in Peterborough. That was a major effort, but I think it did make a big difference. And that leaflet contained all of the information about the hub, and we saw an immediate impact. We've taken the decision more recently, and as the virus began to spread, not to take that approach. That was based not on any particular scientific evidence, but it just felt appropriate that we find other ways to communicate. And I'd just play back Matt's point really on this, and that is the strength of our partnership has really come into its own over the last 6 months or so. Councillor Walsh mentioned through her leadership the 90 or so voluntary organisations that have come together and stayed together. And actually we found that through that network and the spin-off networks that we've been able to reach communities in different ways. And to Councillor Yassine's point around how you reach groups that may not access digital media, we've found that there are other forms of communication that aren't necessarily leaflets, but do still capture the dialogue appropriately. So socially distanced face-to-face work when we're not in lockdown, of course, the opportunity to go into care homes or schools or other social gatherings that are within the rules and so on, we found through that network have been so much more powerful. So we will leaflet again. I think it's proven to be beneficial, but we're not heading in that direction at the moment.
Thanks, Adrian. Could I just dig into that a little bit more and just ask about that decision? Thank you. Because was that, it's not supposed to be an awkward question. What, you've kind of indicated there, it wasn't based on the science, so it was obviously based on something else. And I wondered if is that because you believe that's not what residents want, or that residents would react negatively to having paper through the letterbox, or was it for some other reason? I'm just quite keen to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally we wanted to and still do want to try and communicate in lots of different ways. And leaflets are one option. We've done lots of advertorials, as they're called, in the media as another option, printed media and online media, and then all of the network work that I've described. But actually, fundamentally, the issue was one and still is one of cost. It's a hugely costly exercise to distribute to 70 or 80,000 properties. And if we're going to do it, want to do it properly, and not just target, pockets of our community. Everybody deserves the right to know what services are available to them in a crisis. So it really comes down to cost and logistics, but primarily the cost. So if we're going to do it, we need to do it well, and we need to, I think, wait for the appropriate time. And I'm confident we've found other ways to communicate in the interim.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Councillor John Fox, please.
Yeah, just 3 questions. One was you mentioned about the gatherings in rural areas. I'd be interested to know what the age group of those was, and what we're doing to address this, and are we getting out to them? That they shouldn't be gathering. Obviously, we do it in social media and every other aspect we can. But what are we actually doing to reach them to say this shouldn't be happening? That's one question. Do you want me to do one at a time or all of them?
Officers, would you like it one at a time or all together? No. All together, please, John.
Thank you. And the other one, and I know, sorry to drag this one up, but it comes under page 53 with the, no, it doesn't, sorry, whichever page it comes under. The fly tipping, obviously, it is antisocial behaviour in the rural area, especially. You can't go anywhere now around, well, I don't, because I'm at the moment shielding, but you can't round where I live to go anywhere without seeing fly tipping now. It's sort of terrible. Are we utilising the cameras we have? I know this probably is going off tact a little bit, but are we utilising those cameras? What's the result of utilising them? And are the courts doing their bit? Because if I'm reading correctly, and I don't believe everything I see on social media, the punishment does not seem to be fitting the crime. Well, I might be wrong on that, so, The last one is page 57. That does slightly concern me. I'm sure you will put me right in my place, and I hope you do. Explore, this is the CCTV services. We're going to explore commercial opportunities where it can offer support to the private sector with the aim of achieving income that could further reduce running costs. Could you explain that? Because I would hate to see that being diverted away from our antisocial or behaviour issues just to gain money, if you know what I'm saying. Not very good at explaining things, but you know what I mean.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. They're all for me, so you picked me out. If I work through them each in order then, so in terms of the gatherings in rural areas, to be honest, we've had a mix of intelligence about, in some cases, there have been very defined groups. You're probably aware from your own ward how there's been issues with youth gatherings in certain park areas, which we've recently addressed. But it's not fair to signal out any one area. I think we get groups across the city gather for various different reasons. What I do want to do is make it clear that this is an improving picture. I think people, particularly since the full lockdown, are getting the message, but those that aren't clearly stand out at the moment. And we're all, we've got a really tight community that are giving us the information so we can respond to that. How are we dealing with it? Well, we're making sure that we're working with the right, not just agency officers, but community groups that can interact with the right people at the right time. So I've been able to commission the likes of Youth Inspired young people group specialists who are doing a lot of outreach work for us. We're consulting with faith groups where it's appropriate, or we've had across the whole spectrum, different ages, we've been able to get into them with the right community leads. So I feel like we've got a good response for that, but I just stress that it is improving. What's good is that there's fewer people out there now, and we can see them when they do, and we're able to act upon it. Does that answer that sufficiently for you? Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't mentioning the issue on my patch. I was mentioning the rural, but it's the same issue, and you answered it well, Rob. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In terms of fly tipping focus, I think it might be helpful because this has come up quite a lot of late. And again, fly tipping is something we've tried to maintain a focus on because it is such a challenge across the city. We have got cameras now. We are using them. Many members of the group be aware that we had a task and finish group just last year, which gave a number of recommendations, which we're seeing through. But I'm afraid I haven't prepared stats in terms of other than that's in the report of what successes we've had from the cameras. So if the chair will accept, I'd like to do a briefing note to follow on beyond this, just to give you a bit more understanding of that. Yeah.
Yes, please, Rob.
Great, thank you. And then finally, in terms of CCTV, I think this is about us making sure that we're maximising opportunity to meet our community safety need, which is absolutely of importance for us, but also where we can exploit opportunities with the right partners, expanding the service to get a better offer, basically to get more screens, to get more staff and make it more sustainable. We all know that we face budget challenges, but if we can work with things like social housing providers is a good example, where they've got issues with their properties and they help part fund the service, that's got to be a good thing for us, because we've got the expertise to manage it and deal with it, but we haven't always got the funding that we need, as we all know. And so it's about working with those right people at the right time to give the best offer we can and give a better service for Peterborough.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Just my concern was the fact that I hope it doesn't, you know, you get a clear distinction between the two. I'm all for getting the money in to help produce a better, you know, system, but I don't want to see it diverted, and I'm sure nobody else does, or Liverpool Council's diverted into that side rather than the original idea of CCTV, and that was to reduce crime and also antisocial behaviour. So I'm sure it won't. I have every faith in you, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, I'd like to note the recommendation in the report, which is for the committee to consider and scrutinise this report and endorse the approach being taken under the portfolio of the Cabinet member. Are the committee satisfied we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object, please. Councillor John Fox still got your hand up. I guess you're not objecting. Okay. Okay, there's no objections. Okay, thank you very much. Irene Walsh, I'd love to thank you for the hard work you do, and obviously all your team that are supporting you. We do, this committee really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members, for the questions.
You may, or obviously you may leave now, officers, if you so wish. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 12, monitoring scrutiny recommendations, page 61, sorry, to 66 of the agenda. I'll hand over to David, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a standing item on the agenda to give members the opportunity to monitor responses to previous recommendations and say if they believe further monitoring is required. Not much to note here, just that there's a sort of legacy recommendation really regarding the previous uplift of Section 75 funding. I just got confirmation that that did happen as endorsed by the committee. So that's just proposed to be marked as completed. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, agenda item 9, forward plan of executive decisions, page 67 to 114. Can I advise there's a, for the forward plan, which was published on Friday the 15th of January. It was emailed to committee members, and this will be referred to in this meeting. Are there any items on the forward plan that the committee would wish to receive further information on, please? Okay, I see no hands up. Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 10. We'll now move to agenda item 10, work programme 2020 to 2021, pages 115 to 124. David, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a formal opportunity for members to alter the work programme for the remainder of the municipal year, although this will of course be discussed at the group reps meeting also. Thank you.
Just raise your hands if you've got any comments, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, committee to note the dates of the next meeting, 22nd of February 2021, joint meeting of the budget, and that's is that right, David? Is that, or has that been moved now? The
yes, so the new date is the I'll just get it right. Hang on. Yeah, the new date is the 22nd. So it's the agenda was published.
New date is okay. And our next committee meeting will be on the 2nd of March. That'll be lovely. Thank you. Moving on.